Good evening, it's 5 o'clock, special common council meeting, City of Marshfield, Tuesday, October 14th. Again, 5 o'clock. Call to order, roll call. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C, public comment period, correspondence. At this time, I will recognize persons in attendance wishing to address the council. Upon recognition by me, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. Comments will be limited to no more than 5 minutes, and persons are asked to be respectful when addressing the council. No action will be taken regarding items not on the agenda. However, the council will take comments from the public under advisement. Please note that council members will not respond to your comments or questions. Pete Latzer.
Yeah, that's the button.
There's a little button.
Right at the base.
There you go. Is that good?
Perfect.
Good evening, Pete Lotzer, reside at 1209 East 25th Street, Marshfield. I'm also a member of the Communications Committee, been on the committee for 4 years. Just wanted to speak real quick to the council. Know you're in your budget talks right now, and this is just a few things we on our committee would like you to at least think about. Number one, I do want to thank you guys. I know the budget constraints are very tight in the city of Marshfield, but one of the things that we are concerned a little bit with the committee is a little twofold problem is right now the communications budget is definitely going to be cut again this year, and that cut is making it go back to about 2019 in time. That's where their budget's going to be this year. And for two people in that committee are running that department, it's a pretty significant cut. One of the things we're trying to see if the council would at least at some point in time look at possibly moving Tom out of that funding source and into something more in the city's funding source. He's a communications director. Media should be more David. We believe Tom should be more of an employee of the city of Marshfield directly. He is a communications person for the city, not really media in a sense. So just something to think about. A couple other things that just want to mention that they have helped the city save a tremendous amount of money. I'm sure the fire department can attest to this. They did a lot of work with their referendum this past term and saved at least between $30,000 and $40,000 to the city of Marshfield doing the work in-house instead of getting that contracted out. So when you're looking at all this, make sure you're also looking at contracting sources and what you're going to pay those people. You were paying contract source for media way more than what they're even budgeted for now, back 7-8 years ago. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the budget. Excuse me, I got to get out my glasses here. Another thing that they're trying to do in-house is they're doing their own cuts in-house. Cell phone usage, driving, going to meetings, they're cutting all of that out. So again, try and keep a little bit of what's going on in that department in the forefront of your mind. And again, look at what they can do to assist the city more. They're internally looking at sponsorships for things to try and curb some of that bite from the city. So again, these gentlemen now are becoming salespeople, trying to sell sponsorships to get the money to run the programs that everybody wants. Another thing that they're looking at is going to the school board meetings. And that was actually a request from the council back years ago that they wanted them there. That's just not going to happen with the budget the way it's sitting right now. They're going to have to take that out just due to time constraints and the bodies to do that. So again, we're just looking at, keep in mind what's going on in that committee and in that area, and just keep that in mind in your budget talks. So that's basically what I'm just here to just remind you about. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for all the effort into the budget also.
Thank you, Pete. Are there any other citizen comments? Any other citizen comments? A third time over, citizen comments? Seeing none, we'll move into item number D, approval of minutes from the October 6th, 2025 budget meeting. We have a motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Dellis. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote. Alderman Spiros?
What is your vote, Mr. O'Reilly? You can just tell me.
Item E, continue review and consideration of recommended 2026 budget. Rebecca Spiros, Chairperson of the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, presiding.
All right, good evening. We will start with letter F on your agenda, presentation, staff responses to questions, requests from the October 6th meeting. Steve, you're going to handle this part?
Thank you very much. Yes, I will. I want to start by saying that, when we have those budget meetings, there's always questions that come up between the meetings. I've heard from some of you. Hopefully, as I've gotten these requests, I've sent out the answers to all of you so that if someone's asking about a certain expenditure or certain department's budget or whatever, everyone gets the information, not just the person who requested it. So you've probably seen some emails from me in the last couple of days and you're thinking, I didn't ask for this. Someone in the body did, and we want you to all to hear the answer. In addition, one of the things that was talked about a little bit during the meeting on October 6th, it didn't come out at the end under request for more information, but it kind of was talked about throughout, so I felt it was worthy of noting, and that's our application for grants. I think that there was a request, and I think Jordan Munger, our accounting manager, included that in a response that I sent out to you over the weekend, showing all the grants that we've applied for and what we secured. It's not detailed in terms of text describing each of the grants, but it does at least give a listing of them. I want you to know that we are becoming very active as much as we can be at seeking grants. Rebecca, you brought a great one to our attention. I know we've been looking into that. And we've got the innovation grants that the state is offering that we're also digging into whether or not we might qualify for those. So please know that as they come to our attention, we're trying to see what we might be eligible for, because any money we may be able to plug into for things we're providing or could provide is a benefit. Now, if you look to page 4 of the minutes that you just approved, you'll see at the bottom of the page under questions for follow-up, 2 things were requested. One was a list of all the cuts made by department. And again, Jordan Munger, our accounting manager, put this together. He showed not only that, but he also showed some information about, broadly speaking, where the cuts were made, what topical areas received the most reductions in the process from when the budgets were first submitted to when they were ultimately have gotten to the point where I'm presenting it as a recommended budget. We'll take, when I'm done here, certainly we'll take any questions on any of those things that you see as to how the monies have been shifted a little bit from the initial request that came to us from department and division heads. And then finally, the last one is possible revenue sources to hire a community development director. In just a minute, I'm going to invite Jennifer to come to the podium and talk a little bit about the general fund piece. Councilmember Tompkins had raised the idea, could we use the additional funds that we have over 30% of annual operating expenses in our general fund reserves? Could that be a potential revenue source? And it could for that position. I'm going to let her speak a little bit to some of the thoughts and concerns about that. Beyond that, I can tell you that certainly we could look at cutting other expenditures to make room for hiring the community development director, whether they be monies that we're currently spending on other economic development related items. We have some expenditures we make toward economic development. We could kind of repurpose those and fund a community development director. We could make random cuts in other places to other services to make room. There's no silver bullet, I don't think. But if it's this body's desire to try and find a way to make that happen, we certainly stand by you to try and accommodate that. With that, I'd like to ask Jennifer to come up and just speak to the general fund issue in terms of our general fund reserve status, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and some of the thoughts about potentially using those monies for a salaried position like this.
All right.
Good evening, everyone. Just as a general refresher of what do we mean by fund balance, I'll just go through this quickly for you. We're not able to really see the whole screen. Sorry about that. Is there a way to make that visible? Thank you. All right, so just as a quick refresher, fund balance represents the equity in the governmental fund, and it's a measure of our financial health as a city. It's the difference between all of our assets and liabilities, and it's an accumulation over all of our past years of either surpluses or deficits. It's not equivalent to the bank or cash on hand, because cash is just one of many assets that the city holds. As a recommended use of fund balance, it can cover one-time projects or emergency expenses, and it helps us to accommodate for periods of cash flow volatility. Not all our revenues are kind of, some months are heavy revenue. Think of tax collection, December, January. Our state aids come in May and November, and our fund balance and the cash piece within that kind of helps smooth that out as our bills are paid over time. And a use that's not recommended is to fund ongoing expenses. That will likely cause a future inability to fund whatever that ongoing expense was. So we have different categories of fund balance, namely within all of our governmental funds, but within the general fund, we have non-spendable. These represent assets that can't be converted to cash, such as inventories or prepaid expenditures. We have restricted, and those are amounts that can only be used for very specific purposes imposed by parties external to the city. So think of a contract with a developer or our laws at the state, county, or city level. Committed amounts are what you as a council designate for specific purposes. You can also undesignate them by the same action. The assigned fund balance are amounts that our policy allows me to designate for a purpose, although I have not done that. I bring those to you for your approval as committed fund balances. And then unassigned is everything else. So if we started to look at our general fund balance as of the end of 2024, which is the last year that we have an audited amount, our total fund balance for the general fund was just under $8.7 million. And of that, just under $8 million is unassigned. As a percent of our general fund budgeted expenses, that's 31%. And as a percent of our actual expenses, it's 34%. Part of that gap, you'll recall, we budget for contingency, which is a large item that we don't intend to spend it, but it's there to build our base for future years and expenditure restraint. So that's kind of why we see such a big variance between there. Now, our consumption of unassigned fund balance, we intended to use some in the 2025 budget. That amount was just over $474,000. And the specific purpose of this fund balance applied relates to a property tax settlement agreement where in 2025 we paid out on our agreement and we're not able to recoup. We floated that amount in 2025 by using intending to use general fund balance. Now, throughout the course of the year, we will experience some favorability in both revenue and expenditures and unfavorability. But the net of that on a very rough projection is that we might actually only see a decrease of our fund balance of roughly $100,000. So at the end of December in 2025, we estimate that our fund balance will be about $7.8 million or $100,000 less than 2024. Now, within the 2026 budget that has been presented to you, we have intended to use $336,000 worth of that surplus, and mainly those related to items that were in our CIP that we didn't have a different funding source for. So that means by the end of 2026, we'll be roughly $7.5 million if we hold true to all the revenues and expenses in the budget. What that means is at the 30% level, which is the upper part of our reserve, we would need $8.3 million left in our unassigned fund balance. If we were at the lower end of our policy, or 25%, we would need $6.9 million. Given our intended uses of fund balance at leaving us at $7.5 million, we're kind of right in the middle of our range of fund balance per our policy. Now, what I also wanted to go through is to kind of look at the Economic Development Fund and go through that same roll forward exercise. At the end of 2024, we have $1.4 million in total fund balance. We have some non-spendable and restricted, and then we've got about $1 million of unassigned. In our 2025 budget, we had anticipated using about $152,000 of fund balance, meaning our planned expenditures would exceed our planned revenues by that amount. Of that, we included a $200,000 transfer to the general fund to support general economic development efforts. Now, in 2025, we actually received a much higher dividend than we had anticipated. So our estimated ending unassigned fund balance within the Economic Development Fund is likely to be around $1.6 million. In the 2026 budget, we have presented the use of about $657,000 of that unassigned fund balance. This includes another general fund transfer of $200,000 to support economic development efforts, just like it did in 2025. It anticipates a dividend of $0 for 2026 and beyond, and it continues to support the negative fund balance in TIF District number 12. So at the end of 2026, we are estimating that we will have about $953,000 of unassigned fund balance left in the Economic Development Fund. So what does that all mean? Over the past several years, the budget has been balanced by avoiding and cutting expenditures. Think back to 2022, 2023, we balanced the budget by cutting lots of, $700-ish thousand probably per year. Beginning in 2025, we've used the Economic Development Fund to support the general fund for $200,000, in addition to cutting or avoiding about $700,000, $800,000 worth of expenditures. In 2026, we will again avoid hundreds of $1,000s worth of expenditures. We will use the Economic Development Fund transfer of $200,000, and we will use $335,000 of fund balance to balance our budget. So what are some other ways, going back to that original question of, should we use our general fund surplus to fund an economic development director? We could, but again, we're right in that mid-range of our fund balance policy, and doing so, we're going to have to look forward to what we do in 27 and beyond. So revenue options that we have, wheel tax, which has not been a favorable option, nor the transportation utility. One of the items that we will need to look at, and we are currently looking at, is a stormwater management fund. This comes with a reduction to our property tax levy and changes stormwater revenue to a fee-based system, much like our wastewater utility. We can also do that same process for garbage collection, whereby once our expenses for garbage collection exceed our 2014 budget, we will likely transfer that from levy to a fee. Because the levy defined by our statutes will no longer support that service. And the state does allow us to move it to a fee service, but you have to take the reduction in your levy. Now, that's important to note because our garbage contract does expire in 2027. That was a 10-year agreement. It has options for 5 one-year extensions. However, some of our neighbors that also had a 10-year agreement have had to go out to bid recently. They're seeing a 30% increase in their garbage collection. So this will be an important one to watch going forward into 26 and 27. The last option that we have is an operating referendum. We have had 20 years of operating levy limits, and it's really has been limiting our ability to meet the growing needs of our residents. This concept was also presented to you back in January in our 5-year operating plan presented by Kayla Thorpe of Ellers. And it had predicted that we would have a levy shortfall or need for a referendum of about $1.5 million beginning in the 2026 budget. We have been able to avoid that by drastically cutting or avoiding our expenses and using our fund balance and using our economic development fund to offset that need in 26. Can we sustain that for 2027? Or do we need to really look at giving ourselves a reset in our property tax levy after 20 years of being limited by or net new construction? If that were to be something that we need to move forward with, there is a tight deadline in order to have the tax revenue available in 2027. There are four opportunities for us to file our question with the clerk. We have spring primary, spring election, partisan primary, and general election opportunities if this is the direction that we feel we need to move. So with that, I've just gone through and given you a lot of information. Are there any questions, discussion?
All right, thank you, Jennifer. I will open up the floor for questions. Natasha, go ahead.
This was an excellent presentation. Thank you for very clearly stating that we should not use our fund balance.
Thank you.
Does Eric give his hand?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Steve, do you have anything else under letter F?
I really don't. And I think that what Jennifer did is address the part about the fund balance and also the status of the Economic Development Fund. It doesn't mean that those are complete non-starters, but we needed you to know some real cautions about looking at those areas as a means of funding the position. A position that I think many of us have agreed is something we really need to get to. But apart from that, and like I said earlier, cutting back on some other monies we spend on other economic development areas to make room for it, I'm not sure what else to throw at you at this moment, as much as I'd like to see it, which is why I struggled with the idea of not putting it in the 2026 budget, as much as it's been talked about. It's a matter of trying to find $160,000 to be able to make that fit. But I would take any questions about that or anything else.
All right. So we're moving on to letter G on your agenda. This is going to be the council discussion, possible actions on changes to the recommended budget. During this portion, I'm going to go from person to person. If you have anything that you want changed in the budget, something added back in, something taken out, please give us your thoughts on that now. I would like to wait until we move all the way through everyone before we start taking any motions to make any changes. That way everybody can hear everyone else's thoughts and chew on that for a moment. So we're going to start with District 1. Mr. Fire, go ahead.
I don't have anything.
All right, District 2, Mr. Werman.
Thank you. Just had one question after that presentation. And Steve, I don't know, if this is something that we could table, I guess, for later, or just come back to kind of like what we've done here. But for that community development director position, obviously we've been looking at a lot of grants. I appreciate Jordan putting together the info on grants. Super helpful. The other thing I would want to talk about is there any tie-in? I think this position, what's interesting about it is like it's kind of a gray area right now because we don't have anybody in it. So when I think about things like the potential change here at, our planning and event coordinator, is that something that could be absorbed there? And then we have money that we could take that was allocated for a specific position and is applied to a new position that could maybe absorb those job duties. I'm just trying to think outside the box about where some of this funding could come from. So that's really the only thing I can think of. Everything else in terms of the budget, I think I asked most of my questions last time. So.
Yeah, I will add to that. I mean, we're certainly in a better position in the community development department than we've been at in a while, having a planner on board and poised to name someone as our full-time zoning administrator. But yeah, that's a critical position, and those monies might ultimately be something we can pool, if not now, depending upon how that discussion goes, what to do next with that position, pool toward being able to take somebody on during the year. I haven't really gotten that far yet.
Derek, do you have anything else?
I think that covers everything for me for now. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Tompkins?
I do not have anything to add or subtract from the budget.
Mr. Varsho?
Nothing for me.
Mr. Coran?
No changes.
Ms. Dellis?
Not at this time.
Mr. Giles?
No, nothing.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Nothing.
Okay. Mr. Reigel is not here. Okay. That comes back to me then, I guess. So I will give up my chair. All right, thank you. I agree. I think in looking at the budget, we're really tough on revenues, and I think we have to look at that. How do we get more revenue? And the way to balance a budget is either pull more revenue in or make additional cuts. I do think that the community development director is a crucial position. I feel like there are a few areas that I would like to throw out there as a possible discussion for cuts. And I don't know that this is enough to make up money for that position. I think based on the fact that we wouldn't be hiring this person in January, I think that's pretty clear, probably wouldn't get anybody by that time, even if we started advertising now. I'm looking at the history of how long it's taken. I would like to look at a couple of things. So Nikki did give her resignation through the Parks Department, and I would propose that we do not refill that position at this time, and that we take those duties and those are divided up among the rest of the staff at the Parks Department. I do think that what she did is really important, and I do think that having the events downtown are still necessary. So I don't want to see that as, any sort of punishment to the citizens. I just think that, we could possibly look at dividing those duties upon among other staff members, or even some of our quasi-government organizations possibly offering to pick up some of those events. I would like to look at the amounts requested by Mackey and Main Street. I think with Main Street, I think cutting $10,000 from the Main Street budget would be okay to do. I also think that I would like to talk about funding Sierra's position through Mackey. I know it's a difficult thing, but I feel like if we were to get our own community development director, it sort of would be a duplication of services. I think that we could look at her position and fund it in a different way, maybe by the services she provides. So a fee basis rather than just paying her whole salary. I think it's worth discussing. And then I had a question. We've always received a dividend from the utility, and they're not going to do that. I was wondering if there is ever a possibility of looking at a stormwater dividend. How does that work? And
Yeah. I see Jennifer walking up there, which is good because I froze for the moment.
I'm guessing that you mean a wastewater.
wastewater, I'm
Yep,
sorry.
wastewater dividend. We certainly could look at a contribution from the wastewater utility. They are, per our policies, entitled to receive their share of interest revenue, and they have accumulated a sizable amount of that revenue over the past, I think we've reinstated recording that about 3 years ago. So we certainly could use that as an option. If you wanted to give some sort of thought to a percentage basis or a flat dollar amount or change that up, or if you wanted to create a policy as such, similar to what Marshfield Utilities does for their electric, water, and communications utility.
Okay, so looking at that possibility, I hate to put you on this spot. I probably should have sent you this before today's meeting. I did send a lot of questions. I forgot this one, sorry. What kind of numbers could we be looking at if we did indeed do some sort of a policy?
So they earn probably roughly the same amount of interest or possibly a little bit more in the past as the city has. Now, they are undertaking a large construction project and have a heavy CIP need for the next 5 years, so we will want to balance that in. We will be looking at, we did not do a rate increase for 2026 because we are in the midst of these heavy construction projects and we wanted to see what our revenues and expenditures, how they changed. So we will be doing a rate increase or a study, I should say, early in 26 for 27. So keeping in mind the balance between, we don't really have that classification in our own department of above or below the line. It's all just part of their general revenues, but we can certainly start to designate that as such if that's a directive that you would want.
Okay, I would like to hear the opinions on the rest of the council on that being a possibility, as well as maybe get more information for the next meeting. And I apologize that I did not bring that to you beforehand. So that, I think, was everything I'm thinking. Again, just as a reminder, we are eventually going to have to probably absorb the communications director salary into our budget. We may get that one more year that's not in there, but after that, we're gonna have to do something. So I feel like we have to look at where we can get extra money. And it has to either come through revenue or it has to come through cuts. So that's my list. And I kind of just would like to open it up and see what people think about a wastewater dividend.
If I can just comment on a couple of your remarks first. The issue with Nikki Anderson, who just resigned as far as the event and program coordinator, I think it'd be very wise. I've had conversations with some staff people. I talked to Justin himself this afternoon to hit the pause button on refilling that position until we've had a chance to discuss what opportunities there might be. I think everybody recognizes we spent a lot of money, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get that plaza constructed. We don't want it to flounder. We want to see activity, concerts, festivals, whatever it can be. but there probably are some other opportunities for models that we might be able to use to make sure that that continues, and it could involve our economic development partner entities and who knows what. So that's, I think it's a wise thing to hit the pause button for this moment, and not for a long period of time, but to start evaluating pretty soon what the alternatives might be. And I also want to comment on the funding for the business development director position at Mackey. I'm not sure if this is what you're saying, maybe you are, but Natasha, you brought up, I think last year and maybe 2 years ago too, the idea of looking at the relationship as more of a vendor type of relationship where we would provide a certain amount of funding for certain services. In other words, we would continue to get the good work that that position does, and yet maybe rather than it being a cost share on the wages and benefits, it would be, we pay you X amount of money, and here's what we expect for those dollars in terms of whether it be retention, attraction, whatever services we're looking for. And again, that doesn't tie to any kind of dollar amounts at all. It's just another way to potentially look at how we interact with them. Just wanted to throw those two things out before we dug into other comments.
Anyone have any comments on Alderman Spiro's ideas? I'll ask one more time. Anybody have any comments? Alderman Coran, thank you.
Question for Steve. So you've talked to Justin and decided to hit pause on this, filling this position. How do we account for that in a budgeting process? I mean,
that's a really good question. We're right here in the middle of it, and it's not, a couple of meetings from now, we're going to be sending it on to public hearing. I'm not sure how soon we can come to a resolution. I think, at this point, we've got it funded in the budget the way we always have, combination of sources. And I don't know if the next 2 weeks we're going to come up with a model that we can confirm and say that this is the new way it's going to go. We're going to have to talk to others, especially if we're including people like, Mackey Main Street, Visit Marshfield, whatever, in that discussion. It may be something where it's going to be an after the fact change in the budget rather than something we can account for right now toward funding a position. I don't know. Depends how soon that dialogue can begin.
so are we thinking of leaving it in the budget and just deciding it later on?
I think so. I mean, ultimately, it may well come out as the city making a lesser contribution. One alternative could be that it's housed by somebody other than the city, and the city pays a certain dollar amount toward the position. I mean, there's a number of ways you could look at cutting the pie. I'd be hard pressed right now to say that by doing A, B, or C, we would save X amount of money in the budget for 2026. I wish I could. Then we're all trying to find money to put together toward a position, but I think at this moment that would be really premature since those ideas have not even been baked yet.
So we leave the funding in the budget, and the position is never filled, where does that money then go to in the budget?
Well, if we go into calendar year 2026 and nothing happens and nobody's doing the position, I imagine it could be potentially repurposed. I mean, it's coming out of the 205 Economic Development Fund. It would be repurposable, if that's a word, just made it up, to be used for other things, up to and including this. I really think that we can't wait that long. I think, again, I don't think there's anybody in this room who wants to see that the plaza just sit vacant and nobody doing anything with it, because we don't have anybody helping to find a band or helping to find events. I believe there's some potential savings for the city, but I don't think we're going to let it linger into the distant future that way.
Okay.
I'm sorry if that wasn't a great answer. It's really the best I have at the moment.
No, I'm just trying to just see what's happened this week. So, okay.
Alderman Giles, then Alderman Werman.
I would agree with Councilmember Spiros. I think revenue is a lot easier than making cuts. I would be interested in more information on a wastewater dividend. And not to put him on the spot, but I would be curious about Mark's views on that.
Yes, I do know that this has come up in years past a few times, and it was decided that it wasn't done in years past, and for good reasons. I'm a little surprised with the question and the possibility of this being brought up, so I wasn't prepared exactly. But I would like to point out a couple of things. The wastewater utility does fund a lot of things with the city. Plumbing inspector, half is paid by the wastewater utility. The GIS is about a third paid by the wastewater utility. Street division, they do a lot of construction in summer months on behalf of the wastewater utility, and they charge directly to us. So I'm not sure exactly the FTEs. I would guess around 2.5 or so FTEs. And engineering charges, finance charges us. So, we do fund and assist in many ways of work that other departments do for the wastewater utility. And I do believe that the code, chapter 14, under wastewater utility, disposition of funds, it's chapter 14, article 61, third paragraph, disposition of funds. I believe that would have to be altered in order to utilize any wastewater utility funding. But that would be the extent of my viewpoint at this point.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Alderman Werman?
Thank you. Okay, a couple thoughts. Number one, I'm definitely not opposed to looking into it. I hear Mark's concerns. I think working with Mark here the last couple of years I've been on council, I think they're very valid. I think he brings a lot to the table and has a very good knowledge of what he's talking about. So if he's expressing concerns, I would love to hear those. However, I'm not opposed to pursuing that. I think applaud Rebecca for thinking outside the box and trying to get something else going, because we've talked, the last 2.5 years I've been on council, we've talked about getting something moving in terms of revenue, and we have yet to do that. So starting to hear some of these ideas come out, and that's no discredit to finance. I know I spoke with them last week about like the wheel tax, stuff like that. So there have been ideas brought forth. I do want to say that. But I'm definitely not opposed to that. I would encourage that we keep thinking outside the box in terms of those types of ideas. The other thing I would say is I would agree with Mr. Fran. I'm interested in how we handle this with, if we're not refilling that position and reallocating that funding. I would rather do it as part of this budget process than wait partway through the year. The other thing I would say is, it sounds like this is an opportunity for us to start calling on those other groups, like your Visit Marshfields and stuff like that, as a potential to incorporate these types of requests in there rather than have full-time positions dedicated to them. Now, it's not something they're currently doing, but I think this gives us that opportunity where we want to say like, hey, we want to partner with you. We've talked about this and what we're looking for going forward. These are the types of things we would be looking for. What can we bring into Wenzel? How can we give you guys a fee that becomes now part of your responsibilities? There's obviously further discussion there, but if that's what we're going to be doing is paying these groups almost like a vendor type relationship or a partnership, then maybe we don't need a full-time position dedicated to that. And I mean, that clears up, a significant amount of money. I say significant, but I think everybody here knows what I mean when I say that, when we're facing the deficits we're facing. The other thing I want to do is kind of question here, and Steve, you might have to give me a little background on this, but I would guess that I'm not the only one on the council that's wondering this, but why are we not doing this budget with Marshfield Utilities as well? I'm a little lost on where utilities falls in all of this. We've had a lot of talk about them for the past 2.5 years. I brought them up at last week's meeting about maybe we could secure some funding from them towards some of our positions. And I feel like we kind of sweep under the rug a lot that is still like a part of the city of Marshfield, and they kind of just operate on their own and are doing their own thing. So like I realized last week, I was like, we're not reviewing anything with Marshfield Utilities budget. I have no idea what's going on there. I know we have council representation there, but also like, should that not be a part of our entire process? There are greater questions that could be asked if we knew utility funding and how they were doing financially, and if that was all a part of this, committing portions of their stuff to the city a little bit more. Because I'm hearing questions about the dividend, and I'm realizing like they're not even here speaking in this. We're not looking at their budget and reviewing their items. So I don't know if there's any other departments like that in the city that we're doing that with, but I do have some concerns that they are just kind of operating on their own, and we're not looking at any of that. And I feel like that should be a part of this process.
Maybe if I can address the first part too about the issue you raised with, the position of events and program coordinator. I understand that the desire to move forward and get something in place and be able to look at these other issues as a result. But I haven't even had a real conversation with Justin yet. I think Nikki needs to be involved. We have to understand what all that individual has been doing before we dive into, parsing out into some other models. I'm not trying to delay, believe me, this is a top burner type issue at this point because I think we want to get it figured out. But I just don't want to get ahead of ourselves in terms of saying, well, this organization will do this and this one will cover this, or well, here's how we're going to pay for this job if we haven't even all agreed on what the job looks like. But I don't want to be putting you off. I want you to know that starts tomorrow into Thursday as a top issue. I just can't commit to how it plays in the 2026 budget document that comes out of these deliberations because, again, I presume that within the next 2 weeks, we're going to send one to public hearing. And I'm not sure if there'll be some sort of new model in place by that time. So we can talk offline a little bit about that too. I certainly understand the urgency to try and use this as best we can for our overall planning. With respect to the other issue we were talking about with Marshfield Utilities, a couple things have been brought to our attention, and staff is looking at the prospect of approaching them for some potential funding that might be beneficial to us, that might be realistic for them to be sharing with us in some way. That would be funding outside of their normal operations, because otherwise the PSC, Public Service Commission, governs their financials pretty tightly. I guess I've never known since I came here in 2011 why they're not part of this budget process, although partly it's because they're seen to be in kind of a different world with the Public Service Commission oversight and the electric and water rates. And it's a world I know Mike and Natasha have gotten more probably knowledgeable on since they've been on the commission recently. But that's a really good question. Could they be at the table during these conversations? Could they be more part of what we do? They are under our umbrella, even though sometimes it doesn't feel like that in our dialogue with them. So you're asking a pretty good broad organizational question that we certainly could delve into more. I will acknowledge that.
Yeah, I think it would be important to review going forward. I would love it if we still got 2 more budget meetings, I think, on the calendar. I don't know that, bringing Nick and team in is going to probably go super smooth over the next 2 meetings if we were to try to bring them in and just kind of, start hitting them with questions or something like that. But I do think it's concerning that we don't have all of that under one umbrella at that point. Because like I said, I don't think there's another department that operates like that. I remember when I joined council, everybody kind of joked that even the library is they're kind of off in their silo, right? There's a lot of library stuff that I think people don't understand, especially when it comes to the county and funding there and things like that. So I'm they're here, we're going through their budget. Police and fire, they got all the union stuff going on, but we're reviewing their budget. So I just find it concerning that we don't have everybody together, and not even from this is no shade at Nick and the Marshfield Utilities group either. I'm not saying anything negative. I'm just saying we should be doing this holistically. I think the city would expect that. I think, the council expects that. And I think the citizens would expect that. There's too many questions left unanswered, or there's too many times where you hear rumors. Let's just get it all. I think, Mike O'Reilly preaches this a lot, transparency. We should all be reviewing this together, because otherwise I'm going to get questions afterwards well, how come the utilities has money? And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know. So getting them here and pulling everybody together, I think would be critical going forward.
You're making a very good point, and I have great respect for Nick and the board, the commission, the staff there that works so hard. But yeah, they are under our umbrella, and I think conversation about how that could be better reflected in some of the dialogue and including this process, it's worth a conversation at least.
Yeah, and my last comment just before I yield the floor would just be, especially as it pertains to this question about the dividend. I've heard this come up now this meeting and the last budget meeting. And it's a lot to put on finance. They have a lot going on. I would love to hear more from Nick in the utilities department, and just whether it's a combination of the teams speaking together. I feel like we end up getting left with questions, and unfortunately, with this budget process, things move so quickly. We have deadlines we have to hit for approval. And again, I know we harped on this already about trying to do this earlier in the year and start going through that, but now we're left in that pickle of if there are questions, we're going to get to a point where it's yeah, but we got to move forward. We have to just get the budget done. Because we can't not, or we're going to be in a lot of trouble. So, if we could, maybe even the next budget meeting, bring them in. If there are questions about the dividend, if there are questions about funding and additional sources, even if we don't resolve everything, I think we should at least get that conversation started.
Yeah, I don't mean to drag this out any longer, but that would be helpful to know how they do things in their timeline. For example, we're soon going to have enough information to be able to determine what their pilot will be, the payment in lieu of taxes we get from them. We are hopeful that it might increase. We don't know that. But any dialogue we can have on these issues would be better. So I'm going to continue to agree with you on those comments.
Alderman Tompkins?
So I would agree that there are things that we should look at as far as how we're doing our 205 fund, things like that. I don't think this would be the best time to do it, but I definitely think we need to get it on the calendar as far as the Wenzel Plaza position. Do we want to start asking for sort of a more contracted relationship with Mackey? Things like that, I think we do need to work on throughout the year. And if we start working on in December, I think we will have some good things done by next budget for sure. I just want to address two things. So the Public Service Commission very much regulates how much the water and the electric utility can make. So they put in their expenses and then they're allowed to make a certain amount. But what we need to realize is that the communications utility is not regulated by them. And that is why I asked for the report about the communications utility, because the electric and water utility historically over time is allowed to make, I think, like between 5 and 6% every year. The communications utility has been making about 24%. There's no regulation except for the commission. And the main people who are the customers of that communications utility, which is our fiber optic loop, is the city of Marshfield and the school district. And who are paying for those two things? The taxpayers. So that is why I'm asking for that report, because when I look at the numbers, it looks like we're being overcharged year after year after year. And there's about a $1.8 million fund that they have. Now, they will have to replace it, but we have no information about how long it will take to, when it's needed to be replaced, what was the original capital layout for putting that in. All of that is not answered. And so that's why I asked for that report. Because if we are being overcharged, a department of the city should not make a profit from another department of the city. We don't do that anywhere else. And so that is why I asked for that report. And it's really important that we get that. And that would help our budget, because if we're paying too much, then we're paying tens of thousands of dollars too much every year. The next question I have is, we did as a council approve an endowment for the zoo, and I'm wondering if any of the money from that endowment is going into the general fund to help with the zoo costs for 2026.
Not as of yet. That endowment agreement is still in process. So you've approved it. We're still needing to work through the actual establishment and agreement. So no monies have been allocated from that endowment for the 26 budget.
And if I can go back to your part about the issue with the utility, the communications utility, since you made that request, finance staff has been looking into this and pulled some information together. Of course, it's in the middle of the, everything else we're doing with the current stuff we're working on right now, but I don't think it'll be very long before we can provide a report to you as to what our assessment is of that opportunity.
Mr. Coran.
Just a quick reminder to the council, in regards to Nikki's position, something to keep in mind, 40% of her salary is paid for by Visit Marshfield already. So the cost savings of losing that position is not, it's considerably less than what a typical city, loss of a city employee would be. So just keep that in mind.
And if I could just add to that, yeah, the cost sharing we've had for several years now is 40% Visit Marshfield, for which we've been very grateful to them. 40% from the 205 Economic Development Fund, and the other 20% from the city's park and recreation budget.
Anything else? Okay. Okay, my light is on, but that's because I was pushing it for Mr. O'Reilly because his button's not working.
Thank you. I had sent an email to you, Steve, I think it was Friday or Saturday, about the motor pool and how that works. I've had some discussions lately about what we're charging for motor pool versus what actual expenses are. And the department I was talking with, it looks like they are paying astronomical rates for what they're getting back out of it. Now, that's on the surface for me. I don't know exactly how it operates. And Jennifer, thank you for trying to put the time into it. I didn't realize it was going to be that big of a request, but obviously it was. So I guess what I was getting at with the whole thing, though, is I'm trying to figure out are we seeing this over multiple departments that we could actually potentially cut budgets by reducing those amounts to an actual dollar amount for the usage that you're doing to replace the equipment? Or are we using this as a pot that maybe some departments aren't paying as much as they should and we would have to raise their budget? I don't know the reality, and that's what I was trying to look at with my request. We didn't get all that information. Very difficult to do this quickly. But I think there's a potential I've heard there's been some big purchases over the years that came out of that budget or that motor pool pot, if you want to call it that. And if that's the case, I just don't think we're being realistic by using these state rates and not reviewing them and seeing if it actually matches our needs. Because if you look at all the departments that are paying into it, there could be a significant reduction in the budget that we could look at there. So I don't know if you have something to add to that?
I just, you and I emailed about it. I think this is something, as soon as the budget process is over, we need to dive into. We haven't looked at that for a little while. I know why we adopted the state rates several years ago, because there was an annual debate, and I remember the staff getting in the room. Some of you may have been on staff at that time, and adjusting these rates, and there were debates about what was fair and wasn't fair. So we finally said, look, let's go with the state of Wisconsin and call it a day. But how it plays out in terms of who's charged how much and whether or not it's excessive, I mean, I know that the whole reason for the whole program is to make sure that we collect enough money to be able to replace those pieces of equipment. But I think it's worth a review. And I was talking to Jennifer earlier today. We can certainly sit down in November because maybe there maybe is some overcharging that might play into benefit in the budget process. I'd be hard pressed to say that right now without some analysis, but it's been quite a few years. So your comments are good timing. It needs to be reviewed again, I think, with all the affected department heads who are part of it, parks and recreation, streets, and everybody. So, point taken.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else that they can think of? So I think that we came up with some thoughts, some questions, some ideas. Is everyone comfortable with allowing staff to work on those questions, thoughts, ideas before the next budget meeting and holding off any motions until we get those results? Is anyone uncomfortable doing it that way? Okay, so, all right, we'll move on from number, that was kind of G and H, I think, put together. Okay, I, announce dates, times of upcoming budget meetings. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Barshall, go ahead.
Sorry, I thought you were going to go into H next.
Okay.
So I would like to know what the steps would be to look into a transportation utility study.
Okay.
Mr. Moritz, I know that just a high, don't go into, you don't have to go into so a lot of detail, but what do we have to do first? What would we have to do second? And then, something like a high level thing, just to let the council know what a transportation utility would look like. They do it in the city of Wisconsin Rapids, and they've done it for 2 or 3 or 4 years. So just kind of what we would have to do to maybe look at getting that ball rolling in 26. Thank you.
Sorry. Anything else? Okay. So letter I, announce dates and times of upcoming budget meetings. We have one Monday, October 20th at 6 PM and one on Monday, October 27th at 6 PM. J, set date time for public hearing on 2026 budget, Tuesday, November 25th, 2025 at 6 PM if appropriate. No, okay.
No, we're not there.
That's
That's if you, correct.
Okay, so we can't do that right now. Okay, so skip over. Do I have a motion to adjourn? We have a motion by Mr. Varsho and a second by Ms. Dellis. Please vote.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Yes.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
We are adjourned.